So, Jonathan, it's been 2 years since the nuclear agreement. How, in your view, has Iran changed its regional strategies in those 2.5 years?
Well, I think, the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, was really a trade by Iran to get rid of sanctions on Iran, which were crippling its economy, in exchange for, having a green light to pursue their regional ambitions. It turns out that, in my opinion, their regional ambitions has always been their priority. Their long-term Shia expansion has always been their priority, and therefore, the deal was something that was in their interest anyway. And by the way, although this is not on the JCPOA, I think the problem with the JCPOA is very simple. Ayatollah Khamenei has hedged his bets. He has a hedge. He can go either way in the coming years. So it really doesn't close off Iran's nuclear capability. It delays it. What has Iran done in the region? Well, because the Obama administration was so fixated on getting the deal, they basically gave a green light to Iran to do all sorts of things in the region. And this happened at such a critical time. It happened just when the rebels were at their peak, when Bashar Assad was at his end, 2013, 2014, 2015. It was looking very grim for the Syrian regime, and they were able to call on Iran to basically backstop them. And then Iran, Qassem Soleimani, who's really the genius of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the leader, I think, of the Guard, although his title is head of Al-Quds, which is part of the Guard. Al-Quds stands for the Jerusalem Brigade, so you know what their ultimate aim is. Anyway, Qassem persuaded Putin, say, look, Obama administration is really not going to move in after the red line passed and nothing happened. This is a great opportunity for you and to join forces. You give us the air cover, we'll supply the manpower, and we'll save Bashar. And Putin, for reasons of his own, did that. So what we've seen is a dramatic change in the region, not only in Syria, but we're focusing here on Syria, but in Yemen with the Houthis, supplied by the Iranians. In Iraq, it's unbelievable what's happening. Just to give you an idea of how Qassem operates, this guy, according to John Jenkins, who's appeared on this Fathom broadcast before, this guy only gets 3 hours sleep. So he's a workaholic, and he has been working at this for 38 years, since the Iran-Iraq war. And what he did in October of last year, after you remember the Iraqi Kurds had a referendum, and they voted on independence, and everybody condemned it. But he not only condemned it, but he persuaded all the key players, including Barzani's rivals, the Talibanis, to let them come in, the Iranian-supported Iraqi militias, and basically they recaptured all the territory that was taken by the Kurds at the beginning of the ISIS war. In other words, Kirkuk, which is very valuable with the oil fields, is no longer controlled by the Kurds. It's now controlled, in effect, by the Iranians. This is an example of a guy who moves on the ground, doesn't talk too much, he moves. And my problem with the West so far, if I could give you a 1-second audit of how the West has responded, including the Trump administration, up till now, we'll get into the new leadership of the Secretary of the State Department, Secretary of State designate Mike Pompeo. But until now, it's been more talk and less action. There hasn't been a coherent policy. So in a way, we've been operating under de facto Obama. The Council on Foreign Relations is doing a conference on the Middle East in April, and one of the titles on the Middle East is, "Are we overinvested in the Middle East?" See, that's the thinking since Obama. Too much. Trump himself said, we're going to stop spending $7 trillion in the Middle East and start focusing on infrastructure at home. This is the reality. And so what has to happen, and what I think is beginning to happen, in order to stop Qassem's juggernaut, to stop and then contain and eventually roll back the Iranians in the Middle East, particularly in Syria, is that there has to be a formula where the United States can engage in the Middle East in a way that works for them. What doesn't work is another Iraq. What doesn't work is another Afghanistan. But can the United States find partners that can do the heavy lifting, that can do the fighting? And I think they have. One of the good news of the last couple of years is that the Syrian Kurds do fight effectively on the ground. They retook Mosul. They retook Raqqa. They're excellent urban fighters. And it's tricky with respect to the Syrian Kurds because Turkey is a NATO member and the United States cannot completely alienate Turkey. But I predict that Pompeo will be a lot less worried about Erdogan than Tillerson was. Tillerson, remember, he announced we're going to train 30,000 Syrian Kurds to defend the eastern Syria from the impredations of Iran and Iran's effort to build a corridor from Tehran to Beirut. And then the very next day, after Erdogan complained, he backed down. Yeah. First of all, that's not very effective diplomacy. You don't see Lavrov making a statement and the next day backing down. But this is, again, this is a carryover from the previous administration. And I think Pompeo and Trump are not about that. They're gonna be tough, and they're going to stick to their toughness. So being tough, in the case of Erdogan, I think they can do it because Erdogan, he's constrained by internal politics, and he's constrained by commercial interest. Israel, Turkey are doing phenomenal trade right now. So however hostile they can get rhetorically, it's rhetoric. And that's the thing to remember about Erdogan. He's not like President Xi Jinping of China or Putin. He can't just do his own thing. There are constraints in the Turkish political system, even though he is the most authoritarian Turkish leader they've had since Ataturk. Now, the main message, if I could just wrap this up, is there going to be a war between Israel and Iran? In February 10th, there was nearly a war. The Iranians sent via Jordan a drone into Israel on the Sabbath, and it was shot down, and then there was a retaliation. I think the Israelis sent a message, and the message was, we know where that drone came from, and we took out the trailer where the drone operators were working. They were Iranian, as far as we know, operating the drones from Palmyra, which is a bit north and a bit east of Damascus. That was taken out. So the message is, we know where your assets are. If you hit us, we will hit you. That doesn't mean that every base that was identified in your excellent BICOM report, that lists 12 Iranian bases, that doesn't mean all of those bases are a threat to Israel, because not all of those bases contain people who are fighting Israel. They contain militias from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, but they are mainly fighting Syrian rebels. The question is, what happens when the Syrian rebels are defeated? Where do those fighters go? And my prediction is that they're going to want to continue fighting, and Iran and Hezbollah is going to try to say, well, we're not quite ready to invade Israel yet. I mean, we don't quite have the parity, the strategic parity to win that battle. So these guys are going to have to be sent somewhere, and I predict they're going to be sent to Afghanistan to help the Shia in Afghanistan take over, because there's such a vacuum there now. But anyway, that's an aside. I think Israel has three red lines. One is no Iranian or Iranian proxies, Hezbollah included, on the borders in the Syrian Golan bordering the Israeli Golan. Second, no massive troop concentrations near Israel. They don't mind 10,000, but when you add another zero, that can become a threat. But the most important is no precision missiles, or a limited number of precision missiles that can be used to hit Israeli infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and Israeli civilians. So I think that's the main, the red lines. And I think Israel hopes that Iran got the message in February 10th and will adjust accordingly. And therefore, if they just stick to the red lines, there'll be occasional February 10th type of bombings. Maybe Iran might hit Israel. But as long as there's no kidnapping of Israeli soldiers by Hezbollah like in 2006, or a major terror attack by Iran or Hezbollah, or a foreign terrorist attack, that's the only thing that I think could make Israel go after Hezbollah. But right now, Hezbollah doesn't want a war because they have elections coming up, and Israel doesn't want to pay the price, and there'd be a domestic price in terms of damage from all those missiles that Hezbollah has. So I think there will not be a war in the near future, but when we can talk about scenarios, and one of them is, of course, an escalation that neither side wants. So what does Iran want out of this? Look, a Hojatollah, which is just below Ayatollah, once told me in 2004 here in London that we don't really want a war with Israel. We just want to have sticks to use against Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, or PIJ, or even Syria, Assad at the time, even back in 2004, just to poke at Israel, to keep them distracted so Israel doesn't ever think or want to bomb their nuclear installations in Natanz and Fordow. And it's sort of like a deterrence. And what I'm afraid of is that Qassem and company have become drunk with success. It's a curious kind of success. It's not like they defeated everybody. It's more like, the U.S.-led coalition keeps defeating Iran's enemies. Took out Saddam's Iraq, took out the Taliban, and recently took on ISIS. So, Iran comes in and fills in the vacuum. Iran's very clever, the Islamic Republic. They don't behead Americans on video. This is not a beheading video. This is something else. But they don't do publicly stupid things like the Sunni extremists. They stay under the radar. But in fact, their successes have been largely our own goals, if you will. So I think they're drunk with success a little bit, and I think they've become more ambitious. And they say, hey, we have a hollowed out Syria. We can take it over. We can move in these bases. We can even build factories to make the missiles more precise. Since we have the technology back in Tehran, let's move it over here in northern Lebanon and northern Syria because, hey, then we don't have to move the missiles and have them be bombed by the Israeli Air Force. We just produce them indigenously. So that's crossing a red line. And they're crossing other red lines, including this drone attack on February 10th. I think they've gone beyond the use of the three sticks. And the question is, are they going to adjust? And I think there are serious reasons why they should adjust. I think one last thing, that they made two strategic mistakes, Iran, in my opinion. One is they thought the Obama policy of retrenchment and of allowing Iran to do whatever it wants in the region would go on forever. Even the Europeans, especially the French, are starting to complain about their malign regional activities. Second, I think the domestic protests have revealed in Iran in late December and early January, have revealed an Achilles heel, if you will. The slogan is, I die for Iran, not for Palestine or Lebanon. The slogan is, hey, we need some money here. We need some butter here. Don't spend all the money on the Revolutionary Guard's adventures abroad. Now, Khamenei says, well, it's better we fight them abroad than at home. But this is the third strategic mistake. When you create strategic depth, you know what that means? When you push out your borders and push your military beyond your borders to keep the enemy from getting close to your borders, you may think you're increasing your security, but you're increasing the insecurity of your adversaries.
And that's a dilemma. Yeah.
That's precisely what's happening in Syria. By moving into Al Ghouta now, which is a suburb of Syria that Iran forces are really effectively taking over on behalf of Assad. They're right in the neighborhood of Israel. Now they have a problem, which is the distance between Israel and Damascus is a lot shorter than the distance between Tehran and Damascus. It's going to take a lot more than Iranian corridors and Iranian military bases, which could be seen by Israel and actually provide excellent target practice for the Israeli Air Force. It's going to be a tough, tactically tough for Iran. So if they pursue this sort of ambitious projection, I think that's why you hear Bibi talking about, hey, we might hit you in Iran. You see, the rhetoric is because Iran is making Israel feel insecure, so Israel is looking for a way to make Iran insecure. Now, my hope is this is all part of brinksmanship. It's all part of deterrence. And what you don't want to have in deterrence, this is my last comment, is that, as in 2006, you don't want the deterrence to fail and war to start. Because once war starts, you've got to live up to what the other side fears you are. And what happened in 2006, I have an Arab friend who said, Israel's finished after the 2006 war. I didn't think Israel did all that badly in the 2006 war. In fact, it's held on for 12 years now. But the fact is, it looked like Israel didn't do as well as they were expected to do against Hezbollah. So what does Mike Pompeo bring? Well, he's a congressman from Kansas, I believe an ex-Marine, extremely hostile to the Obama JCPOA, the nuclear deal. And he was one of the most vocal opponents of it in 2015. And then he gets the CIA portfolio. It's a tough job. Administratively, it's one of the toughest jobs. And he's done it okay. So he has administrative capabilities, good communicator. Tillerson was not a good communicator. He has a sense of mission. Tillerson left a State Department that didn't have any sense of mission. The only mission was like a McKinsey reorganization to make them more efficient. Efficient to do what? Diplomats don't make widgets. They do diplomacy, so diplomacy has to have a goal. And as I said earlier, the goal in the Middle East has been, okay, the war against Daesh, ISIS is over, time to go home? Or has it been, let's look ahead and what's the next battle? And that's why what bothers me about the last 5-6 years, I saw this coming. Anybody who's watching Iran saw this coming, that between ISIS, which has no missiles to speak of, no serious state support, and Iran's Revolutionary Guard, I knew who was the graver threat. I knew who I was rooting for. And yet, we totally focused on defeating ISIS. And that opened the door to Iran. So I could see it coming. It's only now that the United States sees it coming. But better late than never. So what's going to happen? I think there's going to be U.S.-Israel convergence on their end games. See, everybody has end games. So think about what the end games are, and then you can see whether they converge. I think there's going to be much more strategic dialogue. And then I guess, so it's going to be, it's very, very good news. Pompeo is very, very good news for Israel. And by the way, it also means a lot of these mid-level positions in the State Department and even in the NSC are going to be filled. I have friends who are waiting to be vetted. They're still at their think tanks waiting to go in. But they are really good news. They understand the Middle East, they understand Iran, and they understand Syria. So and they're compatible with Pompeo's vision. So all of a sudden you have a convergence of Trump's vision, and let's not forget the president, he has a vision too, Pompeo's vision, and these middle-level implementers. So if you can get the implementation and the vision and the strategic cooperation with Israel, they've already have this dialogue mechanism set up in January, I think they set it up. What to do if the JCPOA collapses, all sorts of discussion. If you get people in this room to talk, it can only lead to positive things, and they weren't doing that under the Obama administration. So I think that's good news. Now, the question is Russia. Bibi has a great relation with Putin. Given what's happening here in Britain, can you think of any other Western country that has as good a ongoing dialogue with Putin than Bibi? It's strange, isn't it, given the history of Israel's relations with the Soviet Union, but they are an odd couple. So that's going well, and in my opinion, Russia wants what I call Pax Russiana. They want a Russian peace that consolidates Putin's great success, and that requires a stable Syrian regime. You can't have the Syrian regime overthrown because that would mean failure. You could have a Syrian regime where Assad is an interim ruler and then steps down, but somebody else in the regime circle takes over, somebody else without blood on his hands. Assad has a lot of blood on his hands. But I think that's what Russia wants. Iran wants something different. Now, is it the ambitious Iran goal or is it the limited Iran goal? But either way, Iran has this. They don't look at countries as separate countries anymore. They look at the Levant, they look at the area from Iraq to Lebanon as one vast Shia canvas. And they created, the genius of Qassem is he created this brigade, this transnational Shia brigade that's mobilized in a sectarian way. Oh, we are defending the Shia against the Sunni. This is a multi-century battle, right? And they're transportable. They can be in Syria one day, they can be in Yemen the next, they can be in Afghanistan the third. It's an amazing thing. Now, that doesn't mean Pompeo cannot organize the same thing of Sunni militias that are in the way of the path, because after all, there's a problem for the Shia in Syria. They're a minority, and you can do a lot of ethnic cleansing, but there's still a lot of Sunni left particularly in the eastern part of Syria and the southern part. So between Jordan and the Kurds, there are some Sunni rebels who could be trained properly. If the United States doesn't want to do it, and they tried and failed before, then let the Israelis or the Jordanians do it. But there could be some more work there. Anyway, so what's Russia going to do? That's the big question. Israel has to be a little bit nervous about Russia being so close. Israel needs command of the skies. That's been Ben Gurion's logic ever since the founding of Israel. And I think as long as Bibi can communicate with Putin, I guess you could ask what happens if Bibi resigns. And we can have a discussion about that. But my feeling is there's a consensus in Israel about how to handle Israel, what the red lines are. And the only question is whether there's a Russian speaker in the Israeli military or senior echelons like Lieberman who can continue the dialogue that Bibi has.